In this tutorial, we will have a look at how to spawn game objects at random position. Also check out my latest Udemy course on Unity 6 and C# programming by making a high quality 2D game. This course is for free 30 days, so check out the description. Also check out my other Unity 6 and C# course on my Udemy page. And before we jump into this tutorial, I want to thank Patreon and YouTube members Rajat Sharma aka Game of Life, ShioriPlayz from YouTube, and thanks to for Acades Neil Rose from Patreon. Now without further delay, let's dive into this tutorial. Our script first, so let's do that. So I'm gonna move over to my project tab. So let's head over to this project tab, then asset. Let's right click on this assets, then create in the top, and then mono behavior script, and name that script to something like spawner. I already have created that script and I have it in my script folder, as you can see over here. So what we will do, we're gonna attach this script to any game object of our hierarchy, or we can simply create a separate game object for this script. So let's move over to hierarchy. Let's right click or hit this plus icon, and let's create an empty game object, and I'm gonna name this game object as the name of my script, which is spawner. So I'm gonna call it spawner, and I'm gonna select my spawner game object. Let's drag it in the top hierarchy so I can see all the time. Let's go to transform in the inspector. Let's reset that by right clicking and then reset, and we're gonna select our spawner script. Let's drag it over to this add component section. Basically you need to attach, and now let's open up the script by double clicking on it. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove this start update function. I don't need. Instead we're gonna use this start function, and I'm gonna remove this component. And for spawning, I'm gonna make a separate function for it. So for function, we're gonna type void, and we have to name the function. So I'm gonna call it spawn something like that. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. And what we want to do inside this function, we just want to spawn the thing that we want to spawn. And in order to spawn, we need to use this instantiate function, and instantiate function as a first argument. So I'm gonna make 4 spaces. So this instantiate function just gonna spawn as a first argument. It's gonna take the game object you want to spawn, and the second thing, it's gonna take the position from where you want to spawn, and the third thing, it's gonna take the rotation. So we need those variable. So we gonna make this one comment for now by double forward slash, and comment just don't interrupt our code. And let's go to top of our class, and we need those variable. So the first thing, we need the game object that we want to spawn. So I'm gonna create a apple for that. So let's create a variable for it. So we're gonna make it public so we can see underneath our spawner script in the inspector, and that will be game object, basically the game object that we want to spawn. And I'm gonna call this one apple prefab because I want to spawn apple. So I'm gonna call it apple prefab, and let's close that up with semicolon. And also we need a point from where we want to spawn. So we're gonna create multiple points or multiple position, you can simply say, and we're gonna choose a random one, and from that we're gonna spawn. So we need our position, and we're gonna have multiple position, not one. So let's create a variable for that as well. So we're gonna make this one public so we can set underneath our spawner script, and that will be transform, or you can simply say this transform is responsible for position. And we can simply call this one to something like spawn pose or spawn position, or we can simply call this one spawn point as well. But we do know that we're gonna have more points or more position. We're gonna have something like 3 or 4 position, and we will take a random one, and from that we will spawn. So we're gonna have more than one. So that's why after transform, we're gonna make these square brackets, and this square bracket basically reference this is our array. And array basically hold up multiple things. It can be position, it can be numbers, it can be anything. So we just made it as these square brackets, and it just referencing our array because we're gonna have more than 1 point. So that's why we just created this array. And we can simply press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move over to Unity, and you will see underneath, as soon as our spawner script just gonna gets compiled, you will see that variable just gonna pop up underneath our spawner script. So just wait for to compile, and once it's done, we are ready to go ahead and assign those things one by one. So wait for to compile our script. And as soon as our script just gets compiled, we can see underneath our spawner script in the inspector, Apple prefab just pop up and it says none game object. So I'm gonna create a Apple prefab or that game object what we basically want to spawn, or you can just test with any game object that you would like to go with. So I'm gonna move over to my project tab. Let's go to assets and then sprites folder. I have a fruits folder and I have this apple, so I'm gonna select that sprite. Let's drag it over to this scene view or into this hierarchy. So I'm gonna drag it over to my scene view and I'm gonna call this one to something like apple. So let's call it apple, and I'm gonna drag it top of my hierarchy so I can see all the time. Basically I'm just dragging up so I can see. And our apple seems little bit small, so we're gonna make it a little bit large. So we need to select our sprite from that folder, then go over to inspector and make this pixel per unit less number. Less pixel size mean this sprite just gonna be large in size, so we're gonna make it something like 32. And let's click on this apply button by dragging by scrolling down, and we can see it seems a little bit blurry. So what we need to do, we need to select our sprite one more time, then go over to inspector and choose this filter mode. Basically scroll down and filter mode to choose point of filter, because this is an pixel art and this seems blurry. So to get rid of that, we need to choose this filter mode to point of filter, and after doing that click on this apply button. And as soon as we click on that apply button, we can see the blurry is gone by now. And I'm gonna say add some component. First thing, I'm gonna add a rigid body 2D for gravity. So let's select this apple game object in the hierarchy. Let's click on this add component and I'm gonna add the component which is rigid body 2D, and this is fine. Let's add one more component for our collision detection. So let's click on this add component and I'm gonna add circle collider 2D to feed it perfectly for our collision. So I'm gonna add circle collider 2D, and we can just adjust the collider as well by just clicking on this edit collider, but I'm gonna leave like that. And let's make this one prefab because we're gonna spawn this apple, so we need to make this one prefab. And in order to make the prefab, you need to select the game object first in the hierarchy. So in my case my apple, so let's select that in the hierarchy and let's drag it over to this prefabs folder, or you can simply drag it over to this assets folder in your project tab. So I'm going to drag it over to my prefabs folder in order to make it prefab. Now we have the copy or the prefab of this apple game object. So I'm going to select my apple game object in the hierarchy by now, and I'm going to delete it because we just made it a prefab, basically means copy, and we're gonna spawn it once we click the left mouse button. At that moment I just want to spawn, so that's why we just deleted that game object from the hierarchy by now. And let's select this spawner game object in the hierarchy, and let's select this apple prefab from that folder and drag it over to this apple prefab slot in your spawner script. And now we can see we have the apple prefab, or basically the apples. And the second thing, we need to assign our points. So we need to create some points in order to spawn that. So let's create some point. So what we will do, we're gonna create an empty game object first to keep it clean. So let's go to hierarchy, let's right click or hit this plus icon, let's create an empty game object, and I'm gonna call this game object to something like spawn points. Let's call it spawn points, and let's go to transform and I'm going to reset, and I'm going to drag my spawn points game object. Let's drag it in the top of our hierarchy so we can see that. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on this spawn points game object and let's create an empty child game object, and we can call this one to something like spawn point. But I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to select my game object first and let's select the move tool from this scene view, and I'm going to move it somewhere over here. And if you just want to choose an gizmos for it, then go over to inspector, click over here, and you can choose the gizmos that you like. So I'm going to choose this one. This one seems pretty much fine to me, or this one. So this is seems pretty much cool, and we're gonna create more 2 points because we just wanna spawn it from a random point, or you can simply say a random from a random position. So let's select this game object and let's press down Ctrl D to duplicate, and I'm gonna move this here, and let's duplicate this one more time by Ctrl D. let's to move it somewhere around here. So now we have the points, or you can simply say the position, and we are ready to spawn it from a random position. So what we need to do now, we need to select our spawner script over here, and we need to drag this all of this point one by one into this array, because we just want to spawn from all of this point, and we're going to choose a random position. So random position or random point, so we need all of this position in order to spawn it from all of this position, and we're gonna choose a random one. So we will select all of this point, but as soon as we select, we can see the spawner script just swiped. So what we can do, we can simply do, we can just right click on this spawner script, and then click on this in the bottom says properties. As soon as we click, we can see we have a new tab for our spawner script, and now we can simply select all of these points or all of these game objects, or you can simply say spawn position, and we can drag it over to this spawn points array, spawn point array, as you can see. So now what we can see, we can just simply cut this tab by now, and we can see we can select our spawner game object. So the first point, index 0, index 0 basically means the first point, or you can simply say the first position, and index 1 we can see is the second position or the middle position, and index 2 we can see our third position. So all of these points or this position get assigned with some certain index, and we can see it over here underneath our spawner script. So let's open up our spawner script by double clicking on it, and let's remove this forward slashes. So the first thing, it's gonna take the game object we want to spawn. So in our case, we're gonna spawn this apple prefab, and apple prefab, we do know, we just drag it that apple into this apple prefab slot. Basically we just want to spawn that apple. And the second thing, it's gonna take the position. So we will pass our array name, which is in our case spawn point, and then make this first bracket. So let's suppose we just want to spawn from this middle point, and the middle point's position, spawn position, we can see index is 1. So we can simply pass 1 over here, index. From this position, that apple just is gonna spawn, and we have to type this dot position because we accessing the position. So that's why we need to type this dot position, or we simply looking for our position. And the third argument, it's gonna take the rotation, comma. So what we can simply do, we don't want to rotate like that, so we can simply pass this quaternion dot identity. It's basically means no rotation, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we can call the function in the start of the game. So this start function get called in the start of the game. So in this start of the game, we're gonna call this spawn function, and what spawn function just gonna do, it's gonna spawn this apple prefab at this position. So index we pass 1 basically means the middle point or the second position, and you can notice underneath your spawner script as well. So over here we can see. And the third thing, we pass quaternion dot identity, it's basically means no rotation. So let's call it in the start of the game. So we're gonna call spawn function, and let's close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script, and let's move to Unity by now. So as soon as we're gonna spawn as soon as we will start our game, you will see this apple game object just gonna spawn from that middle point, because as a index we just pass 1, and 1 index basically means the second point or the middle point, we can say. So let's click on this play button in the top, and you will see from this position the apple just gonna spawn. So let's have a look. So I'm gonna click on this play button in the top in order to take a look on it, and let's have a look. You will see as soon as the game gonna start, it's gonna spawn from this position. As you can see, as soon as the game started, it just spawned from this middle position. But we don't specifically want to choose a specific point, and from that point we don't want to spawn. Instead we're gonna choose a random point, and from that point we just want to spawn. For that we're gonna get out of play mode, and let's move over to our script. And for it, so before we spawn, what we're gonna do, we're gonna use this random, so random dot range function. So let's use this random dot range function. So we're gonna start with 0, and we will pass max inclusive. So we're going to pass simply spawn point dot length, and let's close that up with semicolon. So what this random dot range function just going to do, it's going to pick up a number between 0 and spawn point dot length, and spawn point dot length basically means how many points we have. So if we move to Unity, we can see we have 1 2 3, so we have 3 points. So this spawn point dot length just gonna be 3. So this random dot range function just gonna pick up a random number between 0 and 3. It's not gonna pick up 3, but it will gonna pick up 0 1 or 2, so it can be random one. So what we're gonna do now, so it's gonna pick up this random dot range function, just gonna pick up a random number. So we're gonna store the number into another container, or you can simply say into another variable. So we're gonna create a int variable, and we can call this one to something like random. So let's call it random post, or let's call it random index is instead, and let's set equal to this. So let's suppose this random dot range functions pick up something like 0. So this 1 0, so this int random index just gonna be 0, and 0 just gonna be the first point. So now what we will do, we will replace this one with our random index, and we do know this random index just gonna be a random between 0 and 3. So it's not gonna pick up 3, but it will definitely gonna pick up 2. So it can be 0 1 or 2. So let's suppose this random dot range function pickups 2. So this random index just gonna be 2. So basically means this over here became 2, and we can see if we just pass as an index 2, and index 2 we can see is the third point or the last point we can see, and element is 2, basically the index. So this so that apple just gonna spawn from this third position, but it can be random depending upon what this random dot range function pick up. So I'm gonna press down Ctrl S to save my script, and let's move to Unity by now, and you will see as soon as we're gonna spawn as soon as we will as soon as our game start, you will see that apple just gonna spawn from a random point or random position. So let's click on this play button in the top, and you will see, and I'm gonna do with something like, once I click the left mouse button, I just want to do it, and we can see that, and it gets spawned from this third position. And if I just click on this play button one more time in the top, and we will see it should be spawned from a random position by now, not from the third, because that random dot range function just gonna pick up a random number, and we can see it's spawned from here. So let's click on in this play button in the top in order to see that, and you will see, and you can check for with mouse button, basically left mouse button. As soon as we're gonna click, you can just call the function, and that function just gonna do that thing, and we can see the apple just spawn from this first position and not from this, because that random dot range function just picking up a random point. So you can check for with left mouse button as well. Basically, if I just get out of play mode, and we can just go over to our script, and we can simply use this update function. So let's include that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna check if input dot get mouse button down, and I'm gonna pass in this bracket 0. 0 basically means the left mouse button, and let's make some curly brackets. So what basically this means, it's basically means if input dot get mouse button down 0 means if we just clicking the left mouse button, that what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna call this a spawn function, and a spawn function, firstly it's gonna pick up a random index, and then it's gonna spawn from that position whatever the index is. So it's gonna pick up a random position. So we're gonna call the function over here. So let's call it spawn, and let's close that up with semicolon, and let's press down Ctrl S. So basically whenever we just clicking the left mouse button, then what we're doing, we simply just calling this function, and this function just doing this thing, which is picking up a random index and then spawning that apple from that position. So it can be random, and we can take a look in as well. So let's click on this play button in the top, and you will see as soon as we're gonna click left mouse button, that apple just gonna spawn from a random point or from a random position. So let's see that. So if I just click left mouse button, you can see that apple just is spawning from a random position. It just random from this, and we can see, and you can create as many point you want, and you can spawn it from like that. So I hope you get the idea that how you can do these things. And lastly, thanks for watching this video. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. So okay, bye for now, and I will see you in the next tutorial.